For 2 decades, I was more than an employee, I was the promised heir. I built an empire for my boss with the promise that one day it would be mine. But when the time came, in front of the entire company, he betrayed me and handed everything to his useless, spoiled son. They thought I would swallow the humiliation and leave quietly. But they forgot about the silent partner on the board, and the justice she served was colder, more precise, and more devastating than anything I could have ever imagined. My name is Raphael, and for 22 years, Almeida Construction was my life. I started there at 18, as a simple intern, sweeping construction site floors and fetching coffee. The owner, Mr. Almeida, was a legend in our city. A man who built an empire from nothing, known for his toughness, but also for his vision. He saw something in me. He saw my hunger, my dedication, my passion for building. He took me under his wing and taught me everything. I didn't go to college, my education was in the dust of construction sites, in the early mornings analyzing blueprints, intense negotiations with suppliers. I became his right-hand man, his most trusted confidant. Over time, the promise began. At first, it was subtle. "You have a future here, Raphael," he'd say. Then, it became more explicit. "One day, all of this will be yours. You're the son I never had in business terms." That phrase was a sting, because he did have a son. Bruno. The golden child. While I dedicated my youth to the company, Bruno lived a life of luxury financed by it. Sports cars, trips to Europe, penthouse apartments. He had no interest in the business, other than as an inexhaustible source of money. He would show up at the company maybe once a month, always to ask for an advance or to show off to some new girlfriend. He treated me with a poorly disguised disdain, calling me Dad's foreman. Mr. Almeida was blind to his son's flaws. He justified Bruno's laziness as a free spirit and his arrogance as confidence. Meanwhile, I was the engine that kept the empire running. I closed the biggest contracts in the company's history. I managed the most complex projects. I sacrificed weekends, holidays, and personal relationships. I did all of this fueled by a single promise, that my sweat would be rewarded, that loyalty and merit would be worth more than blood. Time passed. Mr. Almeida grew older. His energy waned, and more, the responsibility for the company fell on my shoulders. I was, in practice, the CEO, although my title was only Director of Operations. He trusted me with everything, from hiring new engineers to approving multi-million-dollar budgets. The promise became almost a mantra. "Don't worry, Raphael. When I retire, you take over. The company will be in good hands, yours." I believed it. I trusted him. Last month, Mr. Almeida announced his retirement at a grand party for all employees and partners. I went to the event with my heart in my throat, a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. This was the night my life of dedication would be crowned. He took the stage, gave an emotional speech about the company's history, about the challenges and the victories. He praised me publicly, calling me the backbone of Almeida Construction, a man of unquestionable loyalty and talent. And then, he said, "It is with great pride that I announce my successor. A man who will take this company to new heights, who carries the Almeida blood and spirit. Please, welcome the new CEO, my son, Bruno." The silence in the room was deafening for a second, before being broken by hesitant, confused applause. I stood frozen in the middle of the crowd, feeling as if I had been punched in the stomach. The air was knocked out of my lungs. I looked at the stage and saw Bruno, with his arrogant smile, hugging his father. It was a nightmare. 22 years of my life, of tireless work, of sacrifices, all reduced to nothing because of a last name. People looked at me with pity, some of my closest colleagues with anger on my behalf. I couldn't stay there. I walked out of the hall, passing everyone like a ghost, and went to the parking lot, desperately trying not to break down. The humiliation was physical, a pain that burned in my chest. Later that night, Mr. Almeida called me. I ignored it. He left a message. His voice was calm, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Raphael, I know you might be surprised, but I need you to understand. Blood is thicker than water. And I need you now more than ever. Bruno will need a good mentor to guide him. Your position in the company is secure, of course. I'm counting on you tomorrow, as always. Mentoring Bruno. The audacity was unbelievable. He wasn't just denying me the promise of a lifetime, he was demoting me to the babysitter of the spoiled brat who had inherited my rightful place. I spent the night awake, a whirlwind of anger, grief, and humiliation. My first reaction was to resign the next morning, dramatically, maybe even sue him for breach of a verbal promise, though I knew it would be a losing battle. I wanted to burn every bridge. But around 4 in the morning, as I stared at the ceiling, I remembered something, or rather, someone. Mrs. Isabel. She was the widow of Mr. Almeida's original partner, who had passed away many years ago. She inherited her husband's 40% stake in the company but had always been a completely silent partner. She lived in another city, never attended meetings, and I suspected Mr. Almeida often forgot she even existed. But I hadn't. Part of my job was to ensure her annual reports and dividend checks were sent. And I remembered a conversation I had with Mr. Almeida's late wife, years ago. She had told me, Isabel may be quiet, but she is no fool. My husband made a promise to her, that he would always protect the legacy of the company they built together. It was a long shot, perhaps useless. But it was the only card I had left to play. The next morning, instead of going to the office to resign, I got on a plane. I flew to the city where Mrs. Isabel lived. I didn't call ahead. I showed up at her door unannounced, with a briefcase full of documents under my arm. An elegant woman with piercing eyes answered the door. Mrs. Isabel? I asked. I'm Raphael, from Almeida Construction. I know this is an imposition, but I desperately need to speak with you. She looked me up and down, her eyes seeming to see right through me. I know who you are, young man, she said, her voice firmer than I expected. I was wondering when you would finally come looking for me. Come in. We have much to discuss. I sat in Mrs. Isabel's immaculate living room, feeling like a student in front of a feared headmistress. She served me tea and got straight to the point. I read about the succession in the business papers, she said. A surprising decision. For 2 hours, I told her everything. My history with the company, Mr. Almeida's promises, Bruno's incompetence and arrogance, and the public humiliation at the party. I wasn't emotional. I presented facts, numbers, the projects I had led that had saved the company multiple times. I showed her performance reports, financial projections I had prepared that clearly showed that, under Bruno's leadership, the company would be in serious trouble in less than a year. She listened in silence, occasionally asking a sharp question that showed she understood the business far more than I had imagined. When I finished, she stood up and went to an antique desk, from which she retrieved a leather-bound folder. My late husband and Mr. Almeida were like brothers, she said, but my husband was never blind. He knew that Almeida's weak spot was his son. In this folder is the original partnership agreement. And in it, there is a continuity and competence clause. It stipulates that, in the event of the retirement or death of a founding partner, the appointment of a successor who is a blood relative requires the unanimous approval of the board. An approval that, obviously, was never requested of me. My eyes widened. Mr. Almeida ignored the agreement? I asked. He didn't ignore it, she corrected with a cold smile. He forgot. Or, more likely, he gambled that I would never bother to intervene. She closed the folder. He gambled wrong. What do you want, Raphael? I want what I was promised, I said, my voice finally finding its strength. I want to lead the company I helped build. That won't be enough, she said. If we're going to war, we're going to win. You deserve more than leadership. You deserve ownership. Her plan was simple and brutal. As the holder of 40% of the shares and with the breach of the partnership agreement, she had the right to call an emergency board meeting. She gave me a task: go back to the company, act as the loyal mentor for a few days, and silently secure the allegiance of the most important department heads. They trust you, not him, she stated. Show them there's a future, but not under Bruno's leadership. I returned to the company the next day. Mr. Almeida was relieved to see me, thinking I had accepted my fate. Bruno tried to give me orders, talking about redecorating the main office and buying a new company car, for himself, of course. I agreed to everything, patiently, while behind the scenes, I met with the chief engineers, the finance director, the head of HR. I didn't have to say much. They were already terrified of the idea of Bruno in charge. I just gave them a spark of hope. The board meeting was set for the following Friday. Mr. Almeida and Bruno walked into the boardroom laughing, expecting a formality. Their expressions changed when they saw Mrs. Isabel sitting at the head of the table, with her lawyer by her side. Isabel. What a surprise. Mr. Almeida stammered. To what do we owe the honor? Honor and business, Almeida, she replied, her voice cutting. I'm here to discuss a serious contractual breach and to propose a new leadership structure for this company. What followed was a corporate execution. Mrs. Isabel's lawyer presented the clause from the partnership agreement and the proof that she had not been consulted on the succession. He then presented my dossier, detailing the company's financial performance under my practical management versus the catastrophic projections under Bruno's leadership. Mr. Almeida tried to argue, talking about tradition, about family. Bruno tried to defend himself, but every word out of his mouth only confirmed his total incompetence. Then, Mrs. Isabel delivered her ultimatum. You have two options, Almeida. The first, you nullify Bruno's appointment immediately. Rafael will be named the new CEO, with a 5-year contract and a stock package that will make him a minority partner. Bruno will be removed from any position in the company and will have his allowance cut off. He will live off the dividends of his small inheritance, like a common shareholder. And the second option? Asked Almeida, pale. The second option, said Mrs. Isabel, is that I invoke my right to dissolve the partnership. I will pull my capital, start a new construction company under a new name, and I will take with me the only valuable asset this company still has. She looked directly at me. And I guarantee you that all of our clients and the best employees will come with us. Mr. Almeida looked around the room, at the faces of his directors, and saw he had no support. He was cornered. He had underestimated the silent partner and, by betraying his promise to me, he had lost everything. Defeated, he agreed to the first option. Bruno erupted in fury, accusing his father of betraying him, accusing me of conspiring. He was escorted out of the room by security. That day, I walked out of that meeting as the new CEO of Almeida Construction. The transition was challenging, but the loyalty of the team made everything possible. Mr. Almeida retired for good, becoming a distant, melancholic figure. We rarely speak. I don't think he ever forgave me for being the catalyst of his humiliation, but I think, deep down, he knows it was the only decision that could save the company. Bruno, without his father's unlimited money, had to face reality for the first time in his life. I heard he tried and failed at several small businesses and now lives a modest life, a shadow of the prince he once was. The company, under my leadership and with the wise guidance of Mrs. Isabel, prospered like never before. We honored the legacy, but we modernized it with integrity and meritocracy. My revenge was not an explosive act, but a quiet, methodical restructuring. It was proof that, in the end, competence is worth more than blood, and loyalty, when betrayed, can find allies in the most unexpected places. I didn't need to destroy the empire, I simply inherited it, not by promise, but by right and by the force of a justice that took 22 years to arrive.